Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. Joining me today is somebody who I've had the fortune, who I have been fortunate enough to know for many years now. She's a very distinguished academic. She is a distinguished professor of history and India studies at Shawnee State University in the United States. She has been the president of the Ohio Academy of History and currently sits on its board. She's a former Fulbright scholar, and she's overall one of the most distinguished historians writing and working on India, about India, in the world, and especially in the United States. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Professor Lavanya Vemsani to Global Order. Thank you, Professor Vemsani, for joining me.
Thank you. Namaste, and I'm really delighted to be here. I enjoy speaking to you. We have done a couple of discussions before, so I'm really delighted to be here.
We're going to talk about something today, Professor, which you have been associated with for a long time, and we've been discussing for a long time. But things are coming, in a sense, to a climactic moment, so to speak. We're talking, of course, about the caste legislation, which is being called SB 403 in California, in the United States. This caste legislation, many people believe, is a definitive moment for India and Hinduism in the West, especially in America and in the Silicon Valley. To begin with, take us through a little bit about what is this caste legislation and why is it being pushed so hard at this point in time?
It really seems unnecessary because there is already legal provisions for this type of issues. There is ancestry included. So it seems, why is this being pushed? Why is this being pushed so hard? So we have to examine the history of what is happening in California. As you know, there has
What on earth is a caste legislation? Explain to our viewers what is a caste legislation, and indeed, as you were saying, what on earth is happening in California?
Right. The caste legislation is passed recently by Aisha Wahab in the state legislature. Of course, it didn't have a full support, but still passed. It's called SB 403. It's really aimed at profiling Hindus. The language used also, the background language and the discussions they conducted also blame Hindus. And one of the organizations that's behind this notes and then discusses it as a Hindu issue, puts it on their website as a Hindu issue. So even though they're trying to say it as a general South Asian issue, the goal is to implicate Hindus. And why is it necessary? There are other provisions. There is, provision under ancestry if there is anything that needs to be done. Why is they push for it? There are no noted cases, and historically there was no issue recorded. Hindus have been here since 1880s. Of course, the number increased from 1965 when Asian exclusion was removed. But Hindus have been in California from 1880s. That was a recorded fact. But why is it necessary? Why is this going on? So the context is they're pushing for it as an anti-Hindu legislation. And it's more than clear in the language, in the process that they put forth. When there is no evidence of any discrimination, why is it necessary? And historically, since 2006 onwards, California textbook process has been questioned by Hindus, all Hindus, not just upper caste Hindus. There is no concept of Hindus when they travel outside of India. There might be some bad apples, but you can't blame everybody for these one or two bad apples. Caste doesn't travel with Indians anywhere that they travel. Historically, we have noted in the Caribbean, we have noted it in the Southeast Asia. So speaking about caste as if it is something that travels with Indians is a big issue. And then the second thing is, they're trying to build this issue from 2006 onwards as something of Hindu and anti-Hindu. Of course, they call it a Hindutva. But that shows the anti-Hindu nature of this process that is going on. And it is being supported by mostly non-Hindus. Why are non-Hindus so concerned about this when there is no evidence? From 2006 onwards, there are so many campus incidents of isolating Hindu students who are following Hinduism. For celebration of Holi, celebration of Diwali, all of these came under attack. And of course, the organizations, Hindu organizations, Hindu Student, Hindu Council, and HAF and KONA have already noted the groups behind this. Most of them are non-Hindu groups, and the groups that are supporting this SB 403. So they are building up this narrative that there are these Hindus and they're discriminating others. But where is the evidence? Of course, they conducted a survey. The survey has been disproven, and the survey actually was conducted under questionable tactics. It has already come out that they gave a number, zip code, that anyone from anywhere can use it to complete that survey, as if it was done and it was happening in California. So this is already known. That the tactics were not right, the theoretical purpose of the survey was not right. And Carnegie has done another survey, and they have proved what was known. Of course, discrimination in India, or the coexistence of different people in India, is also not so straightforward, not discriminatory as another survey has been done in India by, of course, another organization. So the India has moved on. This is 21st century. There were reservations to make up for issues in the last 70 years. And historically, we already know Jati and Varna, as they're called in India. It's not caste, actually. Caste is a permanent system, but Varna and Jati has a flexible system. So that's what is in India. And it is not same everywhere else. So when a system, artificial system, that's not even clear in India, and they're arguing for it in California without evidence, what does that show? That shows only the hatred of the groups that are trying to push it. It doesn't show any positive purpose for it. And the population of Hindus in California is only 2%, 2 to 4%, but most of them were, students and not really with any permanent status in California. The people with permanent status are limited. So what is this trying to do? So is this trying to attack the 2% of the population that is there on a permanent status, or anyone that is coming in a temporary status as students and as researchers and trying to make a life in India? The students and researchers that come on a temporary visa are really in a difficult situation. You have heard the situation, what happened to the woman in Seattle, right? She was hit and there was no investigation and no action taken. So the life of students, any student that's coming from India, is difficult. Whether they are from upper caste or lower caste, it doesn't matter. They are all in a difficult situation. So what is this trying to do? Isolate them even more? The students that are coming to study here? So what is its purpose, other than spreading profiling and bigotry on Hindus?
There are many things that you said which are very interesting. Let's try and unpack each of them. Number one, we are talking about a legislation in California, which is now pending governor's signature. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And that's called SB 403. This
Yes.
SB 403 legislation, which was in a sense championed and pushed through by a Muslim politician, Aisha Wahab, supported by many groups and many people and so on and so forth. This legislation is called the caste legislation. It basically fundamentally argues that Indians, let's say South Asians supposedly, but mostly Indian Hindus, carry caste discrimination supposedly that happens in India, and there are instances of caste discrimination in India still, but supposedly that has traveled to America and is being practiced in America. That's the argument. Even though, as you were saying, there is no evidence to back this. The one case that we all know about, the Cisco, the infamous Cisco case, turned out to be false. No evidence was finally found in the Cisco case about this issue. The one survey that was done by something called Equality Labs has been dissed and dismissed by many serious scholars and researchers because of a very fundamental, range of flaws in its methodology, including, including most recently, some of the people who supposedly did this survey, on the basis of which all of this, including caste legislation, came into being, were shown to have deep connections with the Pakistani deep state, the Pakistani intelligence. Based on such a survey, which, as you correctly pointed out, already a different survey of the same nature has completely found different evidence, which was done by Carnegie. But in spite of that, this quote unquote Equality Labs survey has been used to bring about this legislation, which, even though it talks about South Asians, many people believe, and people are protesting across America, across the world, believe it unfairly racially profiles only Hindus, and it actually targets only Hindus as a community. This is the fundamental argument, isn't it, Professor?
Yes.
I want to
Yes,
ask you this.
it does.
I want to ask you this. How long have you been in the United States?
I have been here for almost 18 years. And I have
Well,
seen the issue grow. It actually started growing
this is
when I
exactly what I wanted to
came here.
come to. You mentioned the California textbook case. It's a very famous case where many ordinary Hindus fought back and
Right.
stopped the misrepresentation of their religion in California school textbooks. What really happened, and how did the community win that case?
It has been a long process. We have been sending letters. We have been many Hindu organizations also. Scholars and many Hindu organizations have been working on it, sent letters, sent, of course, supporting information, supporting data, and argued against the representation of Aryan versus others, and also the caste system and the way India is profiled. Of course, ancient societies, Greek society, Roman society, as well as Chinese society, all of the societies have class and caste. And in all those ancient societies, class and caste was officially imposed. The Chinese emperor actually sent his own persons to go around and record aristocratic last names and aristocratic names. Same with Greek and same with Roman and Egyptian. The aristocratic names were recorded, the last names were recorded. And we know in the medieval European history, you would buy aristocratic last names to change your status. So that is common with all societies. So Indian society, when you compare with all those societies, is much more flexible. We have the aristocrats, we have the people raising to different ranks from many communities. There was no official ban. Of course, the books, some of these law books might have some statements, but practically the imposition of these statements is difficult to track because religious heads as well as state heads came from many sections. I actually worked on inscriptions, Vemulwada Chalukya inscriptions, dating from 6th to 12th century. So this is a historical era, 6th to 12th century. Of course, they say the caste is stratified and all that. But when you see the inscriptions, you don't find any mention of any caste. Of course, you find mention of personal names as witnesses and all that, but you won't find Brahman or Raja or anything. You would find just regular names and their places. The only thing that can be construed as a caste is professions, traders and other professions like the smiths and all that. Of course, in 6th to 12th century CE, they were the wealthiest classes. Anybody that has skills and traders are the wealthiest, and they sponsored the temples. So most of the inscriptions would have their names. But is it a caste? Is it a jati yet? We don't know. Because Vemulwada Chalukya inscriptions are found in Karimnagar and Warangal district, but they're related to Rashtrakutas. And Rashtrakuta inscriptions also have names. But if you look at the modern names, the jatis look different from what is mentioned in the inscriptions. For example, you would have a 6th century inscription of Arikeshwari actually shows 9 witnesses mentioned as Shetty. But Shetty is a different caste in different jati. In Telangana, it's a different jati in Karnataka. So how do we know what these jatis were from 6th to 12th century? So we argued, I also sent a letter. We argued that showing India as a stagnant society, so showing Indian categories as stagnant and perpetrated for 5,000 years is unfair representation of India, because this never happened in history. We don't have any recorded lists of these jatis or varnas or anything. And flexibility can be noticed in each century. So, but it took a long time because many people attacked us, sent hate mail and all that. From 2006 onwards up to 2012, I think, when the changes were put in and they agreed to have these changes put in. But it took that much long struggle to get these done. But it's not really changing anything, because there are groups that are trying to perpetrate. And as you noted, these are Pakistani deep root groups and societies which are actually trying to perpetrate anti-India hatred, which almost always translates as anti-Hindu hatred in the United States. They're not the same, but still it translates as anti-Hindu hatred. So you would see the same thing happening with this SB 403. You would see these deep state, Pakistani deep state functionaries and the spreading the hatred campaign also undertaken by the hate groups. So how fair is it? If the hate groups are bringing something on a shaky research data, how fair is this bill? Not it hasn't become a bill yet, but how fair is it? It's still under the process, but how fair is it? SB 403 is put forward as if this is going to bring equality, but it's actually bringing inequality. It is actually isolating Hindus. It's actually isolating all Hindus, regardless of who they are, because everybody who forgot caste, because many of us who come here raise our children without caste. We don't even tell them their caste. So the second generation and third generation Indian children that grew up here really don't have any idea of caste or jati or Indian context of society. So how fair is it for them to be made to dictate their caste or their jati? If it is not for profiling, what is it doing? How does it bring equality?
Another very interesting thing that you mentioned. Even though in the instances of caste discrimination that is seen in India, in the occasions that appear, it appears in almost every community. But when it goes to America, the law only targets and only profiles and only sets aside, in a sense, the Hindus. Is that correct?
Right. Right.
Why does this happen? Why isn't it that this sort of investigation can be done for any Indian or any South Asian for that matter?
You know, you have
We all know the answer, but I would like you to spell it out, please.
this is a bill. This is a bill, right? It hasn't become a law yet. It's on the process to become a law. But when it becomes a law, what are the chances of an Italian being asked, what is your caste? What are the chances
Pakistani being
of
asked, what is your caste? For instance.
Right. What is the chance of anybody, Italian or German or French being asked, what is your caste? But if any of the Indians, any Indian, high, low, or Muslim, or Punjabi, or Parsi, doesn't matter. Any Indian, because this is billed as a South Asian bill, has to declare if they ask. So is it fair that nobody has to declare anything, their racial background, their social background? Of course, there is social categorization in every nation. Of course, Turkey has something, and Southeast Asia has something, and Africa has something. Every society has its own classes. Of course, they're all fighting. They're all fighting to eradicate them. But how fair is it for an Indian or a South Asian to be asked to declare?
I'm asking an even deeper question. If it's really South Asia, can we imagine a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi or a Sri Lankan being asked, what is your caste? Even though, for instance, among Muslims, we know that the division between the Ashrafis, for instance, and the Pasmandas is extremely vast and can be extremely virulent. And
Right.
yet, none of this would be considered, isn't it? So
No, it won't
essentially,
be.
when asked, the only people who would be forced to, take a position on this are essentially South Asian Hindus, Indian Hindus, not the
Right.
Sri Lankans, not the Bangladeshis, not the Nepalis, not the Bhutanese, not the Pakistanis, only the
No.
Indians, and among Indians, only the Hindus. Isn't that correct?
Only the
Even
Hindus.
though, even among Christians, for instance, in South Asia and in India, in Kerala, there is deep-seated division between the sort of Syrian Christian and the rest. But all of this will not be addressed. The only people who would be profiled through this are Indian Hindus. That's the problem point, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a problem. The fickle nature of it. It really allows somebody to profile Hindus, because the background literature, background information that is put forth to support this bill is based on Hindus. Hindus are doing this, Hindu law texts allow this, Hinduism perpetrates this. So the background information that is put forth to support this bill is actually based on Hindus. Of course, they made it widely applied, but in practicality, can you really be sure it's for everybody? No, because the background material is aimed at isolating Hindus. So if this law is put forth, the people that will be targeted, that will be profiled, are just Hindus. Just Hindus. I can almost say it for certain, but this is only Hindus that will be addressed, because of its roots of anti-India, anti-Hindu activities of the supporters of this bill.
Let's talk a little bit about the geopolitics behind all of this. There seems to be, ever since Isabel Wilkinson wrote that book in 2020, there seems to be this connection that is being driven, that all of the racism that exists in the West, including in America, is essentially be derived and sourced from something called caste discrimination in India. To me, it seems like this very strange sort of Orientalism. Essentially, what is uniquely a Western and particularly American problem, you're dismissing and deflecting that and saying, actually, no, 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 this is not really racism. At the heart of it is caste. And the moment you say that, the problem goes elsewhere, so to speak. All the history of slavery in America, all the history of color, caste has nothing, even in India, caste discrimination has nothing to do with color. In America, racism is fundamentally about skin color. All of this is being forgotten or, in a sense, papered over, and the blame being deflected. Why is this being done?
Yeah, a deflection. The Of course, for some time there is this effort to identify that. That's the reason I was arguing for some time to get rid of using caste in the context of India, because caste doesn't reflect the complexity of the social practices of India. We should go back to using kula and jati and varna. That represents the actual practice and actual complexity of Indian social practices. It's not a system. In India, it has never been a system. Officially, no lists were made until the Mughals came in. The outside rulers, when they came in, they found it advantageous to make lists of these castes and jatis and use it. So the first people to make it was Akbar, and then of course British followed it and made the list and used it. So it's useful for outsiders, but for Indians it didn't matter. They never made the list and they made them official. We have to look at inscriptions to find out what this was, what that was. So the evidence is so different. For example, the slavery and how the slavery was imposed and the rules of slavery and how the slaves were treated. It's, of course, all imposed through legislation. There were rules, there were, proper conduct and proper things on how this is done. But in India, it was not there. It was not done in a recorded way. They never made the list. They never did this. And of course, there is flexibility. And there are these sub-jatis, sub-kulas, and each kula has its own individuality. And I was actually talking about Sumit Guha's book on Beyond Caste. It talks about all these things, how caste was advantageous to the people within that group. Because it was a peer group. Nobody else can actually go into that group and say anything or impose anything on that group. The group makes their own rules. And how this was actually exploited by the British. Guha's book has done a great job of historically tracking it and seeing it. What happens is, in the Western academia, they don't want to study any of these deeper studies on Indian social practices. It was never a system, but they don't want to regard that as such. Because it was theorized. Whatever the British have theorized, this system has existed for 5,000 years, of course, without evidence. All they can find is this varna. The varna in the Vedas is not what we think of it as now. Anyway, they put it as, because their theory was Hindu society is a stagnant society. So we are ruling it to change it. So these theories were made to oppress Hindu society. And Western academia still continues these theories. They don't want to regard the new research. They don't want to examine the new research. What Wilkerson has used is these colonialist past theories put forward by the British administrators to oppress Indian society. These are rules, these are theories that were perpetrated to oppress Indian society, not to represent Indian society. So she is taking it out of context without evidence and then applying it to Western society. Of course, caste is a Western concept. You can use Western evidence, you can use European evidence, and then you can talk about it. But applying Hindu categories, which were flexible and which were not systematized ever in the history until the British came, is unfair. So unfair representation of Hindus and India is used to deflect something that they understand or they experience about American society. How fair is it? And is it really representative of what is happening in American society and in Indian society? No, it's completely unrepresentative of Indian society, and it's completely a deflection of the point. They don't want to blame the Western society, what is happening in American society, for the perpetrated ills of the society. So they are actually bringing a theory that was not properly researched, just imposed on India, and saying this as something that was always there within a society. There is no evidence for it being there always.
Ask you a question. Let me play devil's advocate here for just one moment. All the concepts and theorizing that you're putting forward is very academic, very intellectually rigorous. Some people, though, would say, well, these are arguments that have always been presented to deflect from actual atrocities that happen. Because if this is true, then what about Phule? What about Ambedkar? What about some atrocities that happen in India even today? How do we reconcile all of that into the framework that you're putting forward? How would you respond to that?
India is addressing these, right? India has legislations. India has draconian SC/ST legislations. And India has the quota system that gives blanket reservations for the caste that were supposed to have faced difficulties in the past. So India is more than trying to make up for the historical evils, even though they're not same across the board. For example, the SC/STs in Maharashtra and the SC/STs in Manipur, their experiences are different. But they get the same advantage.
These days, we see the violence on quote-unquote caste violence is actually perpetuated by, members of the SC/ST community upon one another. I mean, there are many instances of this also. So it's a very complex matter. So when you say the experience in Maharashtra and Manipur, just as an example, or, in Punjab and Bengal are not the same, this is what it means. It means that there is deep variety, which we must accommodate in our analysis, which we don't.
Right. For example, Manipur Hindus, Meiteis don't have caste. And of course, others have. So to examine this and to have a blanket quota system, of course, India is doing the best that they can do. But in the light of all these, in the light of confusion and complexity of things that are happening in India, how is it possible to bring it to America and apply it? How is it possible to actually codify it, make it into a bill and a law?
Especially when there is no evidence of this in America. And the one case everybody talks about, the Cisco case, just to repeat myself, turned out to be false.
Yeah, Cisco case turned out to be false. And there is this caste conference that was held. And Sundar Iyer, has actually come forward to talk about it. So everybody knows the truth. So the truth is known. He was actually taken to the court under Cisco, but it was all proven false. So what is the evidence here? There is no evidence, and there is no connection between the Indian society and the American society. What is happening in American society is completely different. From 16th century onwards, Indian society was colonized and oppressed and, had many more difficulties than American society. And British administrators have talked about these, the landholders. People say the landholders were the oppressors. The landholders were actually put in cages and left outside in the sun because they were not able to pay the tax. So the oppression in Indian society was different. So to bring some kind of textual analysis, to bring some unfair analysis and use it to American society, explain American society, and then deflect the blame to Indian society and Hindus. This is actually taking American society from its blame. It's actually making it kind of like, calling it caste is unfair. And it's making it seem like, an Indian issue that has spread across the world, which is not true, at all.
I said, I mean, hundreds of, the entire history of slavery now is being deflected and called caste.
Yeah.
All the hatred, the great slave trade, bringing slaves from Africa, which Indians have no role in, right? It is
Right.
all being deflected now from American responsibility to Indian shores, as it were.
Right.
Let's talk
Right.
therefore about the geopolitics. Please go on. But before that, please go on.
we were actually enslaved, from 16th century onwards.
Right.
Every time a war took place, many people were captured and taken over to the West and sold off in the Middle Eastern and Western slave markets. So the Indian population was actually enslaved. And for those people who are talking about, Adivasis, STs, and SCs being out of the fold, I want to mention until 16th and 17th centuries, there are temples that are actually maintained by Adivasis in Andhra Pradesh and Orissa, of course, Bengal too. Whole of East Coast has these temples. And Vaishnavas, Sri Vaishnavas have, the gurus coming from, bandit groups and all this. So we know the jati was not as easy as it is now. And fieldwork, the people who have done fieldwork, even in the early 19th century, like 1920s, 1880s, have mentioned that there is recruitment drive by many of these castes, the skilled classes, as well as the lower classes that are so-called lower classes now, but in those days they were not lower classes. They became lower classes only when the artisans were not able to make enough money and became poorer. So until that happened, they were wealthy classes and they recruited people into their caste to have more skilled workers. So people noted about that recruitment drive and all that. So being a landholder, being a priest was not a very wealthy profession in those days. Actually, having skill was much more helpful to get recruited. And of course, about the weavers. And the Mandsaur inscription mentions this group that became weavers. And of course, Pochampalli also. Lots of people came together, became weavers, but they all come from different jatis. They're not one jati called weavers. So we know, there is this movement of jatis from one group to the other. There is recruitment, there are sub-jatis, there is evolution of jatis with new skills. So calling it is unfair, and then applying it to the Western society, that is always, legislated by the so-called free societies. It's a deflection of the fact. And as you noted earlier, it is a complete deflection, complete shifting of the blame. Yeah.
Now let me come to, as we come towards the end of our conversation, let me come to one of the crux points. We have set all the context. And now we have talked about how the blame, in a sense, is being deflected. It is being deflected, Professor Vemsani, towards a group in America. Because this is a Californian legislation, which is today in America the wealthiest, most highly educated, and in all these years, it's been constantly said, the most well-adjusted well assimilated group in the United States. Not only that, this is the group which is, in a sense, the worker bees, the talent pool which drives Silicon Valley. These are Indians, many of them, majority of them, in fact, Indian Hindus. All of this terrible blame is now being cast upon this particular group, which is really, in a sense, a shining light of what the American dream can truly mean. This is why it has deep geostrategic implications at a time when India is rising. Why do you think this group is being targeted in this manner, especially because it is so well adjusted, so well assimilated, hugely influential, wealthy, does not create any problem, and contributes such huge talent, wealth, and education to American society?
Right. There are two things here. The first thing, of course, is clear. The attack, anti-Hindu. So anything anti-India translates as anti-Hindu outside of India. So the deep state and actors against Indian state pushing for it, they see it as an activity against Indian state. So anti-Hindu legislations, anti-Hindu activities, some groups push for it because they see it as an anti-Hindu, anti-India tactic. So they think of it as attacking the Indian state. The second thing is, we really haven't done a good job of enlightening our public about the colonial systems, the colonial symbolism, the colonial theories. Our textbooks still our Indian textbooks still have the same theories, same colonial data, and same colonial imagery. If you remember, when Parag Agarwal became CEO of Twitter, they had this cartoonish image of a Brahmin riding on this sedan and people carrying it. That is an image of colonialism, the colonial loot. It was actually used to represent the queen. The queen was riding on this sedan and all these colonial peoples were carrying it. That was used over and over. It's a colonial imagery. So what's the point of using this colonial imagery for a person who came as a student, worked hard his whole life to prove himself, to prove his worth, and to become what he is later in life? So they're using these colonial imagery, the colonialist exploitation, to actually push it on to the Indians as the exploiters rather than the workers. As you said, the Indians, the Indian students, they come here, they all have difficult life, and of course it's made clear in that recent case about this woman who was hit and run case. Every student has the same kind of life here, very difficult life, and they work hard to come up and do something here. So they are really the worker bees of Silicon Valley, the worker bees anywhere they are. Very hardworking Indian students and Indian community. But the representation is still colonialist. The representation shows them still as the exploiters. They're not the hardworking worker bees. They are the exploiters. They are the colonialists. So the representation is more than clear when they showed this, sedan riding Indian. When did Indians ever ride and arrive on a sedan? They always worked hard and came from below.
Is there an element of jealousy in all of this, that this community has done so incredibly well?
Probably. Certainly, though. Not just probably, certainly. There seems to be that, there is a jealousy that they're able to work and they're able to accomplish something. When many fail, American society is a cutthroat, competitive society. You can't really accomplish without putting in your hard work. So success rate is very hard. So that there might be, the difficulty makes others bitter. So the Indians are becoming this, this sour grape kind of analogy. They did it, but they're bad. You know?
This is very important. What you're saying is very important, because here is, on one hand, India is rising. And part of the reason India is rising is because of its technological prowess. We talk about digital public infrastructure, India's fintech, India's health tech, and so on and so forth, all based on this tech prowess. On the other hand, Indians at the heart of Silicon Valley are being attacked in this manner. Do you think, and I put this to you, if this legislation were to pass, it seems to me that many companies might immediately think twice about recruiting, especially young Indian talent, because not because necessarily they're prejudiced, but who wants to get into a legislative mess, a legal mess? You want to focus on doing your business. And if you can avoid by not hiring someone, even if that doesn't happen literally, it definitely casts a shadow. Isn't that correct?
It is correct. Your fear is right. It is bound to happen. Any entrepreneur who has a startup, would he be willing to take on these risks? He has to have an extra layer of security, extra layer of vetting process. A startup has many difficulties. Most of the industry in Silicon Valley is startups. So are they willing to take these risks? No. So who is going to be affected? Of course, Indians and Hindus. If they hire, they have to do an extra layer of security and vetting process. Who is willing to do that? And if anybody complains, even if there is no evidence, for example, Cisco case was dismissed, and imagine many cases were filed. There might not be evidence, but imagine these small startups taking all this legislative trouble, going to courts, and attending all these things. It's a business. It looks like, implicating Hindus has become a big business. If this passes, it'll become a big business. Of course, there will be many lawsuits. But other than that, what is it going to bring forward? It's not going to bring equality. It's actually going to make Indians be isolated and not find any jobs, because companies will be fearful of hiring anybody that belongs to India, especially if they are Hindu. They won't be able to hire them because of the repercussions. They have to have all these layers, and then if there is a court case, it's very expensive. So can a startup really spare that much time and energy into going through legal processes?
We may be asked to believe, Professor, that all of this is being done because one legislator who's not even Indian, not even Hindu, Aisha Wahab, believes that this will bring greater equality in America. Yes, if I may say so, I mean, they're taking us for fools, if we believe that, then we are really stupid. I don't want to take a position on this, but, one can't help seeing things for what they are. So in a sense, in conclusion, Professor, this is overtly or covertly directed not so much for societal equality, because, to reiterate once again, there is no evidence, there are no cases in America. So what are we talking about? This is essentially to hit out at the heart of, in a sense, Indian power, the place where it really matters, the center point of technology in the world at the moment, Silicon Valley. That's the bottom line. That's the geopolitical strategic bottom line, isn't it?
Right. So of course, hitting at India is one step, and hitting at the heart of American tech industry is another. And the population, tiny population. How is it going to bring equality by attacking 2% of the population? A tiny population of immigrants. And why is it being proposed and supported by non-Hindus? Why not Hindus are speaking about it? And Hindus, of course, many belonging to the Dalit groups have expressed concern at it. And you may have heard about Mr. Makwana, who has actually collapsed and died on the floor, expressing
protesting
concern.
this. And he was a prominent Dalit activist.
Mm-hmm.
If at all, if this was true, somebody like Mr. Makwana, Villain Makwana, a prominent Dalit activist, should have been supporting. If this was a just cause, he would have been supporting this cause. Instead, he was protesting it consistently until he actually collapsed on the outside the Cupertino courthouse, I believe, and died of a heart attack while protesting it.
Right. That is the stress. That is the amount of stress they are putting. Hindus, Dalits or non-Dalits. This bill, SB 403, is not going to help Hindus. And anybody that lives as a Hindu, Dalit or others, it doesn't matter. It is not supportive of them. It is not going to help them. And they realize this. All Hindus have realized it. This bill is being put forward for geopolitical reasons and for economic reasons to attack the groups that are in California. So this is not really brought forward to help anybody, to support the Hindu groups, Dalits or non-Dalits. So it's going to affect everyone. It's not a bill to support them. It's a bill to isolate them, profile them, and in the long run, affect their livelihood. It would affect their livelihood. It would be difficult for any Indian to get a job in California if this happens.
It also impacts young entrepreneurs wanting to raise money in California, isn't it?
Right.
Because this casts a constant shadow on people who have done no wrong. There is no evidence they've not done any, only because they are constantly being profiled by this legislation.
They're constantly being profiled, and any startup would have difficulty raising funds because this shadow is there, and it is all colonialist. It's all based on colonialist theoretical constructions, not based on realistic research and realistic data. There is no data to support it. So it's a geopolitical anti-Hindu legislation put forward based on colonialist ideas and theories, which were disproved. And this affects the small minority. Why is a state bringing forward a bill affecting such tiny minority of the population? The goal could only be geopolitical and also the economic reasons. So some groups are really opposed to the success story of this model minority that was put forth. There are groups that oppose and that are not supportive of this. So this seems to cast a shadow on a group that was considered model minority and successful minority, tiny minority in California. So it's really aimed at profiling them, isolating them. You know what happens when a group of people are isolated? The next step is attacks. The isolating small groups and attacking them, and then genocidal activities begin once they get isolated. So once these are isolated, not able to raise funds, have to move, not able to find jobs, what happens? It's easier to attack them, easier to call them, of course, Hindutva and all kinds of names that they have already given. These are all boogeyman terms that they created to implicate
a straw man, and then you try to beat it down.
Right. Simple Hindus who are law-abiding citizens of America will be targeted by made up theories and made up bills that are passed. There is no evidence for any of this. The colonialist theory that it was based on, that was used by Wilkerson, no evidence for it, but she uses this stereotyped theories, colonialist theories, to apply it to American society, which actually deflects the blame from America as if it is, normative practice. And then it is taken over and passing these artificial bills, not really based on evidence. What is it doing? It's actually attacking law-abiding, hardworking citizens of America. And its purpose is anti-Hindu and anti-India. Otherwise, why use these colonialist theories? Why not have any evidence? What is this hurry in passing this bill? And why are non-Hindu and non-Indian groups in this? They are the big supporters of this bill. If it is not a bill of hatred, why are the anti-India groups in this?
So Lavanya Vemsani, thanks very much for talking us through this entire saga. I know you and many others are doing all they can to stop these terrible things from coming to pass, to protect the community in America, to uphold its success as a model minority, and to ensure that it is protected and its success continues. I wish all of you the very best of luck. Thank you very much, Professor Vemsani, for talking to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.